Greetings, folks. Joseph Kursky here with you on the Esri Education team. Thanks for joining us for this session, but also for the Education Summit. Hope you're having a great time so far. I've learned a lot already. This track right here, this session, to me, cuts to the heart of what many of us, probably most of us, all of us in geospatial education related zones really are passionate about, and that is engaging students in community issues. And that's exactly what we're going to focus on here with three sets of wonderful people, beginning with one of my longtime GIS education colleagues and friends, Dr. Wing Chiang. And he's got two colleagues with him that I will introduce as well. But Dr. Chiang is a professor of geography, as you can see here, and GIS at Palomar College in San Marcos, California, beautiful part of the world. In addition to his teaching duties, he coordinates with the GIS, drone technology, and environmental studies programs there at the college. He's the principal investigator of the NSF-funded UAS Operations Technician Education Program, and also an assistant director with the NSF-funded Geospatial Technology Center of Excellence. And I think Dr. Chiang is one of my go-to people for, hey, what's your advice on how to structure a UAV program? So I've had long time respect for him for that and many other reasons. And Wing is joined by Craig Jones also, and Goethe Grutenhaus as well. And you can see where they work and their credentials, and really appreciate you three being with us today. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity to speak to all of you, and I appreciate everyone joining us and also learning from all the panelists in this session. So what is service learning? As you can see on the screen here, service learning is an approach to teaching and learning in which students use academic and civic knowledge and skills to address genuine community needs. So in this particular presentation, the community needs that we're looking at is food insecurity and also the reduction of food waste. So a very brief history of how this partnership with Craig and Goethe came about at Palomar College. As you can see, we have a pretty long history of doing service learning at Palomar College going back to 2014. And just kind of randomly at a community meeting is how I ran into Craig, who then introduced me to the work that he's doing with the North County Food Policy Council, which he helped found. And then we were, for several years, we're just looking at food insecurity and mapping out some of the infrastructure that local food banks have in the area, or mapping out free and reduced lunch programs and their size at different schools in the county. But then in 2018, I think that is when Goethe joined us, and we expanded the scope of the project to looking at the issue of food waste and recovery. And then just this past year, we kind of ramped up all of the layers that we have created with Craig and Goethe, and also updated the metadata so that they can be more descriptive and understandable to outside users. So I think now I'm going to turn it over to Goethe, who will provide you with greater context as to why this is super important.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Wing. I'll go ahead and pull up my slides here. So hi, everyone. Once again, my name is Goethe, and I work for a nonprofit called the San Diego Food System Alliance. And my work is really focused on food waste prevention and trying to implement solutions to food waste. So I'm going to give a little bit of a framing of the issue to help kind of steer this conversation and be an intro for when Craig talks about what the map has done and how it's actually helped us implement some of these solutions. But let's start with the facts. In the United States, this is our pie chart. About 40% of all food that we produce actually ends up going to waste. And here you'll see lots of photos from different programs that my organization has managed over the years, where we've documented food waste in different kitchen settings, both in institutions like hotels and casinos and universities, as well as at homes. And you see that food waste is oftentimes actually perfectly edible food. You know, most folks, when you think of food waste, you might think of the banana peels and things like that, but really it's perfectly good food that's going to waste for a number of different reasons. But ultimately, the quantity of food waste that we're seeing in the US is a huge waste of resources. About $218 billion are wasted every year on wasted food. It's a really large contributor to climate change. About 8% of all global greenhouse gas emissions are attributed to food waste, which is actually a really big percentage. In addition, there's other environmental resource waste, like fresh water that's used to grow food is eventually wasted when that food is wasted, cropland that's being used to grow food. At the same time that we have this excess of food that's really just ending up in the trash can, there are also lots of folks experiencing food insecurity. And here in San Diego County, about 1 in 5 are food insecure. So here in the state of California, the legislators have recognized that being able to address the issue of food waste and food loss is a great way to help achieve some climate change targets in our state. So they actually recently passed some legislation that sets statewide targets for reducing the amount of organic waste. So in other words, food waste that is disposed. And this bill is really interesting because it also legislates an increase in terms of food donation. So it actually says that there must be a 20% increase in edible food that's donated. So this is really kind of where this GIS map is coming into play, where we have started mapping potential food donors, and we were able to put some estimates in terms of how much food they might potentially be wasting that could then be recovered or rescued by food assistance agencies like food banks or food pantries. And being able to see this information of where the donors are and where the need and the programs are that could accept and redistribute that food has been an extremely helpful exercise. So I'll pass it over to Craig to share more about what that looks like.
Thank you, Gertrude. Let me get my self here with my item, if I can find it. There we go. Hold on just a second. Pardon me while I get this set. Don't you love technology? Okay, here we go. So what you see on your screen here, this is the online home of our GIS platform on our Food Policy Council webpage. Of course, where all this information actually exists is on Palomar College's ESRI capacity, and we can't thank Palomar College enough. So how to geographically understand food insecurity? We have several map layers indicating this. Demographics, including 2 measures of poverty, Black and Hispanic population concentrations, etc. These are all being indicators of food insecurity. The next step is to know geographically resources to address food insecurity. We have multiple layers related. This particular slide shows locations of commercial kitchens, which can be a resource for food assistance processing. Now, this is an early map layer, which is now being replaced by student work from this last spring semester with new data covering the entire county of San Diego and with multiple types of food outlets, not just commercial kitchens. Public schools are both a resource for food distribution and an indicator of where there is food insecurity. This map shows student enrollment qualified for free or reduced lunch, with a larger percentage showing neighborhoods where food insecurity exists. We have several public school layers showing food assistance programming as well. So we need to know where food assistance programs are. We partner with the 2 major food banks in our region for their data on location of grassroots food agencies and programs, which can be compared geographically to where food need is. One Palomar student volunteered showing our region's public transportation. Disadvantaged families are often dependent on public transit for all of their access, including how to get to food assistance. This map shows transit routes, stops and stations, and a 1/4-mile radius around each station stop, indicating walking access. It's useful to see where individual cities and their boundaries are related to food need and resources. This is especially true for the city's responsibilities now to reduce food waste. This layer can be reconfigured as needed to show boundaries and take away the infill colors so that other data layers can become clear. This slide begins to show how this platform can help understand the comparison of need to resources so that gaps can be addressed. This map shows the distribution of poverty concentration compared to locations of food assistance programs. One of our community partners obtained a data set of potential backyard produce by zip code. Useful because non-commercial gleaning operations can provide a great deal of recovered produce for food programs. Gurcha explained how cities in California now have requirements to plan and implement reduction in waste and to recover wasted food. We've mapped several cities' data of solid waste per commercial and multifamily addresses. We calculated the proportion of food waste in this waste stream using factors from the state of California. So there are two maps. This particular one shows the location of waste producing addresses by different land use types, those land use types as defined by the state of California. This map displays the same data, but now keyed on the calculated annual tons of food waste from each address. Our platform has been useful for other human needs as well. This map was prepared for a grant application to the state of California for transportation services for disadvantaged communities. The grant required that the project be made up only of disadvantaged or low-income community census tracts, and that the census tracts be contiguous. Using our demographic layers with attribute data, we were able to craft the proposed project area and demonstrate compliance. An advanced Palomar intern working with us this spring completed several tasks for us, including this heat map, comparison of potentially recoverable wasted food with the locations of food assistance programs. This allows an immediate understanding of how food assistance programs can benefit from food donations in partnership with generators of excess foods. And one more map. The same intern produced this demographic layer of concentration of households receiving food assistance SNAP, that's food stamps, by census block group. Now this allows comparison by block group with indicators of food insecurity, providing a focus of where SNAP or food stamp enrollment should be targeted. So that's my presentation. And we'll be glad to answer any questions that people have.
Yeah, folks, we have about 2 minutes. Appreciate the three of you sharing what you did. Such an important issue. You know, back in the not too distant work travel days, I was always very sensitive to, you know, catered events at different, since I was on travel so much with even the Esri user conference, right? You've got these big events. How much are you working with Marriott Corp and others that do these big events? And then what happens when that food is taken away from the conference attendees? I always wondered about where that goes and if they're connected to the local organizations that are active in this area. So anyway, this is important that you're doing this. Thanks for all the data. Does anybody have questions specifically? We've got a couple things shared, actually a lot of things shared in the Q&A/chat box. Well, the chat box anyway. Nothing in the open questions and answers for right now, but
and I'll put our contact information in the chat.
Perfect. So, many thanks. Oh, you're right on it. Okay. Thanks,
Right.
Dr. C.
You know, I know we presented a whole lot of information in a very brief period of time. So I'm open to anybody contacting me. I put my contact in the chat, my email. If you want to get to me after the fact, I'll be glad to speak with you and get you more detailed information.
Yeah, Jody does have a question about how were students involved in this whole process? You've got about a minute if you want to address that.
Sure. So before the semester started, Craig, Gurcha, and I would come together and brainstorm some idea and needs that their organizations have. And then I would match students, or basically they would come to my class and pitch the project ideas to students at the beginning of the semester. And then I'll match students that are interested to them.
Well, this fits right into our whole discussion about service learning, community issues, important issues of our time. And now I'm going to transition to someone that I've known probably for 12 years, 13 years-ish, Dr. Sheila Steinberg. And I'll let you go ahead and start sharing screen there. But thank you three for presenting. Much, much appreciated. Dr. Steinberg is she's an Esri book author, Esri liaison, faculty president, full professor of GIS, social and environmental sciences, and chair of the Brandman University GIS committee there at Brandman University. She's also joined by Monica Shukla Belmontes. And Monica, I believe you're dean, aren't you, of curriculum development? Oh, we've got the contact information right there. But thank you for joining us as well. Much appreciate having you the three of you on here, and appreciate all the things that you've done in the past for promoting GIS in education and research and beyond. I'm looking forward to what you have to say today. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Joseph? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, great. So we have two of us here today. Our one colleague just had a baby, so she's with her baby on maternity leave, but we're representing her. We're including her because she was part of our presentation to put it together. So great. Thank you so much, Joseph. You're always wonderful to work with. My colleague and I, Dr. Shukla Belmontes, are happy to talk with all of you. And the title of our talk today is Infused GIS, Using Location Intelligence for Business, Equity, and Social Sciences. And we'll get going right here. So here's a little bit about me. I am an Esri Press author. I've also worked with Sage as well as Springer. I like to work in an interdisciplinary format, and really my passion is taking GIS to communities to empower them and to help them reach their full potential using data visualization and GIS. So I'll turn it over to my colleague next.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you here. I'm Dr. Monica Shukla Belmontes. I'm an associate dean, so maybe dean in the future, but almost there. So associate dean for the School of Business and Professional Studies. I oversee our curriculum, assurance of learning, and tutorial faculty affairs. Basically, we have our competency-based education programs that are self-paced in addition to our traditional online and hybrid curriculums that all include Esri and GIS types of analytics work. I've also been a GIS project manager for our programs, and I've an experience in the areas of data analytics, statistics, business administration, and operations.
Great, thank you. And I'll introduce our colleague who couldn't join us today. This is Dr. Lindsay Yosef Chalikas. She's assistant professor of GIS and data analytics. She's from the School of Business and Professional Studies. She also is a GIS project manager who has interdisciplinary experiences in business and data analytics, and also some social sciences. And she has GIS experience in undergraduate and graduate programs. So take it away, Dr. Shukla.
Sorry, here we go. So
yeah.
What Infused GIS is, when we look at what we're doing at our university, we look at strengthening our programs and our curriculum using GIS and integrating that GIS through our different types of abilities for students to really demonstrate their knowledge, skills, and abilities, and looking at how that's going to be shaping evolving communities and careers. In addition, one of the reasons we looked at this idea of infusing GIS throughout our curriculum, both in arts and sciences and the School of Business, and also now looking at other areas of the university as well, is because we noticed that there may be skill gaps, and using the Esri and GIS software resources tools and the critical thinking skills can help to fill these gaps that have also been identified by the U.S. Department of Labor.
Great. Thank you. So we use GIS for resilient education, and we believe that as part of meeting this skills gap, students often, when they hear the term GIS, number one, they may not know what it is. They might be scared off by it. So what we've tried to do, because our university serves adult learners, we have about 13,500 students, but they're spread out over 27 campuses across geographies and online. So we're trying to get our students to engage with GIS and tie it into the work that they do. We have a lot of veterans, we have a lot of active military, we have a lot of adult learners who already have jobs. And so when we get the students excited about this new technology, new to them, called GIS, we try to tie that into their current work, because we know every job these days is becoming digital in some way. And we also know that if you're going to be competitive in the workforce, you need to bring some skills related to data visualization and data analytics. So we know that having this visualization and analysis skill is going to give you a strategic advantage. So we really, one of the things we try to teach our students and focus their projects on is, let's have you pick a project that is tied to your work, that uses data, and that can be used to help you and your supervisors potentially engage in what we call data-driven decision making. So that's not just making a decision based on how you think or feel, but it's really looking at the data, making an informed choice about, you know, what are you going to do for your next steps and your next moves and for your allocation of resources.
Perfect. And tying on to what Sheila just mentioned, for example, that application-based learning. So there's really this focus on making it applied and hands-on, a focus on problem solving, that we're interdisciplinary. Just another example, when you look at things like our MBA has a capstone, for example, where students need to look at a business proposal and project in terms of where they would maybe start a new company and how they would start that company. And when you look at the field of marketing, for example, which is in business, they originally just project what they think would happen. Where is their target audience? Who is that customer base? But then actually taking it a step further, using some of the analytics tools we have through Tapestry, for example, or using even the Living Atlas, it gives students actually an ability to integrate real data into that decision. So instead of just saying, I hypothetically think this is where the target audience and market would be, they can actually see the demographics, where are these individuals located. So it's a really nice bridge between our School of Business and the School of Arts and Sciences that creates this interdisciplinary approach to teaching and our design as well. And in doing this, what we're really doing is cultivating holistic learners that are thinking outside of the box, that are also engaging with their community to get more information about whether it would work, that business proposal, that idea, that project. And not just in the field of, let's say, retail business, but also we've looked at it in many fields as well. So looking at it from the perspective of healthcare, public information, public administration, also looking at it through community lenses, nonprofits, all of these different sectors use and can integrate and benefit from the use of GIS. We also have our Center for Instructional Innovation that makes sure that our learning is always up to speed, and we're really looking at focusing on the best types of pedagogy and andragogy strategies and technologies for teaching spatial thinking. And what we really do is focusing not just on point and click, but really what are students doing and what are the layers that they need to move forward with their proposal or their project.
Great points. And, you know, we know that Esri has a lot of point and click hands-on learn lessons that are tied to real world problem solving. And so as the underlying pedagogy and approach that we take is really like, let's engage in applied learning that's meaningful. Let's meet our students where they're at. And so we call this the empowerment of learners. So we're really trying to think about our students, not from a technology standpoint at all, but from a, how can you solve problems? How can you get the big holistic picture? How can you walk into a situation and work with a team to really understand that all the different aspects of a situation? Because we know environmental problems don't exist in a vacuum away from social justice. They intersect with each other. We know that economic problems are tied to politics. We know that social inequality is tied to crime, etc., and environmental issues. So with the GIS, we're really trying to teach our students that big picture view, and we call it empowerment of the learners, because we're teaching them to be innovative and creative, and we're trying to break that whole siloed approach. Like in sociology, let's say you just look at people. No, you have to look at the environment too. In business, you just look at the bottom line. No, you have to look at the triple bottom line, and you have to look at issues related to inequality and social justice as well. So I think we're in an interesting age for education, because we see not only the infusion of GIS, but it's this infusion of interdisciplinary approaches, and the GIS is perfect for facilitating that. Okay. Dr. Shukla.
A little bit about our programs as well and where we've integrated this. Like we've mentioned, we have this interdisciplinary approach that we've focused on, and it was great to see in the chat box the comment as well about students using this in other areas. This is from another institution, but looking at the San Diego Food Systems Alliance. Similarly, our students are looking at how they can use this in a range of areas. So we've recently developed 3 graduate certificates in partnership with Esri, and these are focused in the areas of emergency management using GIS, economic development using location intelligence, and geospatial marketing analysis. These are all graduate level certificates that are offered in both our traditional online format and then as well as a competency-based format in the future. And so what that's really allowing students to do is to see how they can use GIS in each of these different fields and areas. And then we've also had and developed our business intelligence and data analytics certificate. Our master's in public administration has GIS integrated within it. And we've also looked at how we have real world examples of how this was used, especially if we look at just the COVID-19 pandemic as a specific example, but how is that addressed by different states, different governors, different types of options, and using GIS to really navigate that for each of these different states. And we also have our undergraduate certificate in GIS and nonprofit organizations. And we've built in our GIS and data analytics certificate at an undergraduate level as well. So we really do see the value of students understanding how to use these tools in all areas and all fields, not just specific to one area and one targeted field, and not just specifically focused on location, but really beyond that, also the critical analysis skills of how this integrates with other department areas.
And Dr. Shukla, could you comment for a second on competency-based? Because our university, like we said, is geographically dispersed, but we deliver our courses in 3 formats. One that we call blended or in person, second, traditional online, which is kind of old-fashioned for us, and third, we do competency-based. And I'm going to ask Dr. Shukla just to say a few words about that. It may be something that's unfamiliar to a lot of our listeners.
Sure. Our competency-based education programs allow students to complete the same program they would in the traditional format, but they can go at their own pace, which means that they are working through the content. They still have to complete the same types of activities, exercises, discussions with the faculty member. They can read social discussion posts among students that are also within that competency, but they're moving at their own pace. So they are not having to go along with our 8-week traditional time frame that we have for each of our terms. Instead, they're able to maybe progress faster or slower if they need the additional time to really work through some of the materials. So this is a program that works with our adult learners because we work with non-traditional students who may be military, active military, for example. They may be students who are maybe parents who, this is going to be the best opportunity for them to work on their classes is middle of the night, for example, or weekends. So we are able to, through our CV program, really focus on all types of learners and what's best for them.
Thank you. So the power of engaged teaching of GIS online, we know I've taught GIS in the classroom for a lot of years, and starting with Humboldt State University and then moving on down to Chapman and now Brandman. We know that the technology can be challenging, but you need to make it fun. You need to make it engaging. You need to make it about things and issues and concepts that the students care about. Every student lives in a community. Every student has a job, usually working somewhere. And so we try to tie it in. We do a lot of the community orientation for our students and say, pick a problem in your area. Try to go out and study this problem. Collect some data on this problem. Use some data from the Living Atlas. Collect some original data and plot that data and tell a story about the problem or issue you're looking at. So storytelling has factored in a huge capacity for our students because what do they say? A picture's worth 1,000 words. That translates to maps. That translates to data visualization. But you have to be able to draw in this kind of data from different places, which Esri actively facilitates with their software and the Living Atlas of the world. And so many of our students are practitioners. So they're hands-on. They're dealing with food insecurity. They're social workers. They're trying to help women and mothers, have enough to eat. So that's where the presentation that just preceded us was outstanding. So we're really focused on these case studies, focused on diverse industries. So the fact that we have it in business, that's important, and we know from marketing and supply chain, but it's also so important to tell the story of social justice. Who's winning? Who's losing? Who needs the resources? Where are they? How can we best get them there? And empowerment of communities. Instead of looking at our ethnic and minority communities as lacking something, identify their strengths and build off of that. And GIS helps to accomplish that, often through public participation GIS, which is where you capture the local knowledge, you hook into it, you document it, you package it, you give it back, and then people and communities are empowered. Next slide is by my colleague, Dr. Shukla.
Perfect. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how our program is developed, and then Sheila, I'll have you answer the question that's in our Q&A in just a moment. So I'll go through this slide. In the Q&A, there's a question on, could you please give more details about what co-branded with Esri entails? So I'll go ahead and answer this, and then I'll talk through the slide, and then you can answer that question.
Sure.
What we've done in terms of developing our programs and all of our different opportunities that we have for students to engage with the GIS materials and resources, we actually designed our courses with GIS subject matter experts, partnering with our business subject matter experts. So someone who's a director, a vice president, a president of a company, those individuals who have that business experience partnered alongside with a GIS subject matter expert who has 10 plus years of experience and knowledge in that area, so that we can really look at the examples of how this can be useful for students and eventually their future employers. We also partner, like I mentioned, with the Center for Instructional Innovation that has all types of new learning strategies and engagement opportunities for faculty to use as they're designing courses. We have an advisory board that we refer to. We have project managers that navigate our course design and course work structure. We've also developed curriculum committees. For example, has led our GIS curriculum committee to ensure that we have a really strong foothold on what we need to be integrating in the newest and latest tools we should be talking about in our programs. And our academic leadership also really supports the idea of innovation and new technologies and ensuring that we're always looking at the cutting edge opportunities there. Sheila, I'll turn that question over to you.
Sure.
On what co-branded with Esri entails.
Sure. So to be co-branded, the co-branded with Esri really ties in with those three certificates, our latest certificates that had the asterisks on them listed earlier. It's the one with in emergency management and marketing and community and economic development. So what does it mean that they're co-branded? It means that as we constructed those certificates, we built in for students to take trainings at Esri. Okay, so to take Esri trainings from the training department that they purchase the Esri trainings, and those particular trainings then convert into and are part of the students getting college credit as part of our certificate. So it's kind of a novel approach. We always know the option is there for anybody to take Esri trainings, but we've actually built that in to the academic credit model. So that's kind of a cool and new approach. We've worked closely with Patty McGray, who leads and Nick Frenzy from the Esri training division, as well as working a lot with Jerry Miller from the Esri education. So we work quite closely with Esri to make sure that we're trying to produce the most on point relevant topics. And that is why we say that they're co-branded, because of that.
Perfect. The next question along those lines, Sheila, is also, do you incorporate Esri developed tutorials into your courses, as Esri is a co-sponsor of the certificates?
Yes, we're co-branded with them, and we do incorporate in our traditional. So for us, because we've always been online for so many years, since 2009, 2010, maybe we got into the online. We were created in 2009. We do so much with Riley Peak and the Esri Learn lessons. We've always incorporated them from the second that they existed. Prior to them existing, we created many of our own hands-on, what you would almost call labs. After the Learn lessons came in, ArcGIS Learn, we heavily have incorporated those, as well as Esri Press materials too. So we are actively looking to incorporate trainings, other aspects, but our new certificates that we highlighted are the ones that really involve enrollment in Esri trainings and then transfer that into them getting credit into some of those new graduate certificates. So that's a new approach. We've always used Esri materials, though, in our classes in general prior to those co-branded certificates. So hopefully that answered your question.
And I'll take this third question. Oh,
yeah.
sorry.
Unfortunately, we have no more time for questions, but thank you for sharing your contact information. And Dr. Shukla, I'd love to chat with you at some point too, because sometimes we are able to chat with deans and provosts, but fairly rarely. And so I'd love to get your advice on, how can we message this so that those folks at your level really resonate with, okay, why does this matter to the whole campus? So again, folks, thanks for presenting. I wish you could get more enthusiastic about geospatial. No, this has been wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I'm going to let Megan start sharing here while I introduce her. But thank you so much, Dr. Shukla, Dr. Steinberg. It's great to have collaboration with you over the years, and look forward to further work with you all y'all, as they say in Texas. Ustedes, vous, tú. Okay, but I've got my colleague. Thank you, folks. Megan Dixon here now, and Megan is just northwest of me, so northwest of these features here that you see behind me, up in Idaho at the College of Idaho. And Megan Dixon's geography courses serve an environmental studies department that emphasizes both local and global place knowledge, and her classes employ empirical project-based learning, yay, PBL, in ArcGIS Online. So Professor Dixon, thanks for joining this was really shaping to be a wonderful panel session today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joseph, and everybody else for their presentations, and those listening. I think I'm just going to fit my presentation in after timing myself twice, so we'll see how that goes. Not sure there'll be questions, but if anybody does have them, I'd be happy to get in touch. By some contrast, what I'm really focusing on is the pedagogy of how I teach students to use maps to ask better questions about the things that they're studying. And I'm going to take my camera off just so I can not get distracted by my own face, actually, and keep myself here to my text. So as a final example, if I have some time remaining, I'll show a sample project that looked specifically at a local issue here in Boise. So the entire academic year, this past year, took place online for the College of Idaho, primarily in the Microsoft Teams platform. And students in the upper level class that I'll discuss thus had Teams open along with ArcGIS Online in their browsers. And I want to say that all but one of the undergraduate students whose work I'll discuss in this presentation had already taken an introductory class with me and were familiar with my emphasis on examining empirical landscapes before drawing interpretive conclusions. In that intro class, which I describe in my abstract, students do a lot of observation in Google Earth because that's sort of, widely available. They don't need an account for that. They study a succession of geography subdisciplines such as resource geography or urban geography, doing observation with that satellite imagery. And then I offer 3 upper level courses that develop different aspects from that intro class, but each class builds in part on my frustration with maps that show only one thing at a time as a teacher. So I might show a succession of slides or maps side by side, but I'm really trying to get students to make maps with multiple elements. At first, students find this messy, which is what I end up calling them, and they also find this disconcerting. But my goal in introducing this is to help students discover more complex insights about case studies. As a textbook, I use Dennis Wood's Rethinking the Power of Maps. And this is a sample of a map from a website on which I also draw heavily for examples. It's called Vision Carto. And the maps there are either created by or inspired by the work of French-Polish cartographer Filip Rekatsiewicz. I think I'm saying his name partly French, partly Polish. I don't know how he says it, but it's a wonderful site. This map, which some of you may have seen several years ago, originally in French, here with my translation, combines a spatial imagination of the extent of Europe with the locations of migrant crossings into Europe proper, signified by the number of deaths that occurred in the location at the center of the circle, and the location of dozens of refugee camps. A related example of multiplicity is this map from the Atlas of Environmental Migration, which also contains maps by Rekatsiewicz, as well as maps by other cartographers, such as this one, which, as you can see, requires close reading and interpretation. The first time my students see this, they sort of panic, and then we talk about it for a while, and they discover that there's lots of meaning in it. The maps made by Edukatsevich in particular have a very complex story that must be read and interpreted carefully. And this prepares the students well to think metacognitively about the story maps that they write later to explain their own cartographic process and message. So in the class that I'm focusing on mostly today, students are instructed to start with available layers in Living Atlas related to a topic of interest. Then they're encouraged to throw as many relevant layers onto the base map as they can find. And then using their observations of the spatial juxtapositions, they do additional textual research to find out about other relevant factors and relationships, which they then attempt to visualize on their own maps. The main point is to not stop at the first juxtaposition of layers, but to dig deeper and find more specific elements to the story in one location. That is, you start with the mess at small scale and look at it and ask yourself what interesting juxtapositions you pick up on that might lead you to intriguing questions about the spatial relationships between these different elements at a larger scale that could then lead you to even more interrelationships, which otherwise you might not think to conduct research on. So at the beginning of the term, the students do an exercise to get familiar with the opportunities offered by ArcGIS Online and the resources in Living Atlas. My specific charge to them for the assignment I used this year was to start with this layer that I'm showing, USA native lands, and then add at least one available layer related to fossil fuel or other extracted resources. Partway through the term, I found this map made by a cartographer at Southern Methodist University in Dallas. That was the authorship listed in Living Atlas. As far as the overview explains, this cartographer's work ended here, whereas this was the starting point for my students, although I think this is a beautiful example of the initial task. Another sample version I gave my students is this one that I threw together quickly, like literally throwing it together, for my students to get an overview of possible research hypotheses that you could develop from looking at points of co-location between native reservation lands, wilderness areas, and drought intensity, all layers 2 from Living Atlas. So for example, here you can see that the native reservations on the Colorado Plateau, such as for the Navajo and Hopi, are located right in the heart of the worst drought intensity. Some students might then be led to look into the impact of sustaining livelihood and reservation life in the face of these climatic trends. Sorry, and that lost my place a little bit. Or you might ask them to look at the location of wilderness areas and how close they are to the reservations. And then ask yourself how those reservations got established, why is the wilderness area there, and what's the current relationship between native livelihood and access of native people to wilderness areas. So it's that kind of question that I want to put students into the position of asking. So and go through a series of examples of what the students came up with. So one example is where this exercise could go is this map made by student Latavon Vilaysuk, who ended up adding not only pipelines, but refinery locations, the location of power plants using natural gas and petroleum. She later added population density and then found through further research that the surrounding fossil fuel related industries provided many jobs for residents of the Osage Reservation. Another example of this particular assignment is a map set made by student Ian Meyer, showing what he discovered about the location of uranium mines on Hopi and Navajo land on the Colorado Plateau. Further research prompted him to co-map water sampling results that he found and the path of contamination from the Church Rock spill in 1979. So on his first map here, you can see in brown the location of abandoned uranium mines with water sample results then symbolized in the colors, with darker, more contaminated and concentrated near many of the streams. And then here's a zooming in where you can see again how many streams were affected and where the water contamination levels are high. On this map, you can see the location of the Church Rock spill there more at the upper right, and its long-term effects in the form of water sampling results in the darker red showing higher levels of persistent contamination. So, and then more examples here, this in a related assignment related to climate change. students found more elements they felt should be combined to tell a better story about a situation. So this map is again made by Latavon, where she combined layers to show the relationship between sea level rise, the location of important rice growing provinces in the Mekong Delta, and the delta's deprivation of sediments thanks to the dams upstream. Hasmin's map drew on separate maps and layers she discovered in research to suggest that flood risk, existing food insecurity, and important agricultural areas should be co-mapped in evaluating the threat of change to Haiti's population. And then in my final example, which I'll talk about a couple more minutes, is one by student Marlon Galvis Aceros about his home country of Colombia and a situation that he really felt he did not have a good understanding of, even coming from that country. He wanted to look at the relationship between political, economic, and social factors related to the presidential election and the peace process vote related to the end of the FARC. So I want to mention and express gratitude for the fact that Esri Educational Support very helpfully created an editable layer for us so that Marlon could map data he had found related to the presidential elections and map that onto the provinces map. So on this map, what you can see are layers that he created copying data from separately researched maps of coca plantations outlined here in black, the areas of greatest activity of two guerrilla organizations, the ELN in yellow and the FARC in blue, and then red dots, which showed data he had found about the locations suffering the greatest casualties before the ceasefire. In this, what I would call messier map behind the scenes while he was planning, you can see all his included elements at left, most of which I've just mentioned. And on this map, you can also see that he added the living atlas layer of purchasing power per capita, which helped him explore possible correlations between the locations of casualties and the economic level of those areas, which ultimately helped him to make additional sense of the election results connected to preference for the right-wing candidate who did not favor financial support for the guerrillas as part of the peace process. And so one of the things he was looking into was whether the location of the casualties had any effect on the votes of people in the cities and so forth. Like the other students, through using maps and combining existing layers with further research and creation of his own data in layer form, Marlon was able to develop a robust question, explore related evidence, and come up with a researchable hypothesis and that satisfied him. And in seeking peer-reviewed literature to supplement their maps, several students discovered that they had hit on topics which had not yet been treated with the approach created by their maps, indicating for my teaching purposes that map creation can be a route into more robust research as well. Thank you for your time and attention.
Many thanks, Megan. Professor Dixon, there's some chats coming in about, possibly you sharing your, I mean, this is recorded, but I think people are wanting to actually get your slides or whatever you've got for your presentation. If you could, if you're willing to do that, that's great. You could feel free to respond to the chat there.
Okay, and since we run out of time too, Joseph, maybe I can work through you to help facilitate that, if you don't mind. If I can't figure out the sharing there.
Sure, no worries. Folks, as I said at the beginning of this, community issues, it really is the heart of why many of us actually got into GIS, right? It's never been about buffering for buffering's sake, et cetera, right? It's always been about, we want to engage students in real world issues. And I think all of you have very well exemplified that and inspired all of us. We've got drought, we've got native lands, refugees, food security, equity, and much more. So I just want to thank Megan, Sheila, Monica, Wing, Geerte, and Craig once again for not just sharing with us today in the panel session, but just your ongoing inspiring work in geospatial education and beyond. Really inspiring, and appreciate the energy and all the resources that you shared. Folks, just as a preview of coming attractions, we've got a block coming in about 15 minutes from now where you've got 4 rooms to choose from. So feel free to tap into those. And then 15 minutes after that, so in about an hour and 15 minutes-ish, we're going to have 4 choices for special interest group meetings, which will provide imperfect, but at least it's some way of for us to continue some conversation. So hope to see you at both of those blocks. All right, folks, many thanks once again for sharing, and I wish you all continued success in the future. And for all of you attendees, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, folks. Map on.
Yeah.